This is part 2, and in this part of the economic review, we're going to be talking about economic systems. An economic system is basically, it describes how a country is going to organize its economy and how that country is going to make money. The problem that every country faces is the idea of scarcity. We don't have enough of what we need, and so we need to determine what we're going to use and how we're going to use those resources to make our products and be productive on the world market. All economic systems must answer those 3 economic questions. There's 3 types of economic systems. There's basically, the 4th one is traditional, command, market, and mixed. Most countries are mixed economies because they have a little bit of a combination of market, command, and or traditional. A traditional economy. Economic decisions are based on customs, traditions, and belief. You do what your parents and your grandfather, your great-grandfather did. So they pass down those traditions and ideas, and you basically make a living based on what your ancestors did. An example is subsistence farming, where you make enough, you barter for what you need, you trade for, if you farm a certain crop, then you trade for corn and you sell your wheat, or you trade with your wheat. And Amish is another example of a traditional economy because they hand make everything, and those traditions have been passed down from generation to generation. A command economy, which is the 2nd economic system, basically is where the government makes all the economic decisions. They own the property, they make the decisions, they tell you what you're going to do, they tell you how much to make, and they tell you who you're going to make it for. The government determines the price and the wages of your work of the workers. A perfect example is North Korea, Cuba, Vietnam. Most of those communist countries have a command economy. Market economy. A market economy is run by private citizens. Private citizens, individuals, own the resources in the business. They are free to compete and trade voluntarily with one another. Here's the important part: supply and demand. Prices are set in a market economy by supply and demand. You have so much supply of something, however much you want to buy, that's where prices are set. There really is no true market economy. The United States is close, so is Australia. Those are some areas that you're familiar with, but there really is no true market economy because there's always some type of government involvement. A mixed economy, and that's what most democratic countries are. They have a combination of market, they have command, so you individually get to make a decision on what you want to do, but you have some government intervention. Like, let's say you have to meet safety regulations, or you might have to pay a tax. Businesses, private businesses, own most of the resources, but government regulates certain industry. An example would be maybe in Russia, the government regulates the steel or some of the energy resources. On the continuum, let's take a look. As you see on the left-hand side of your screen, you see government controlling most of the economy. Mix is in the middle, and at the other end of the continuum or spectrum is market, and that's where you freely make decisions. You see Cuba on the side where government controls everything. You've got Russia, closer to the command side, but it's still a mixed economy. That's because a lot of the industries are run by the government, although there are private businesses and enterprises. You see Germany closer to the mixed side, the UK much further to the market side, the US, and then you see Australia. And you can see how, even though they're mixed, that there's a sliding scale, and all of them vary in the degree of which there is government intervention. Let's talk about trade. Trade involves, and free trade involves, the exchange of goods and services between countries. You've got exports and imports. Exports are the goods and services sold to other countries. So it's sold, something that you sell. Imports are bought from other countries. So you're bringing those items in because you're purchasing them. Free trade versus trade barriers. Let's talk about free trade. Free trade is a good thing. Nothing prevents trade. That's the idea of voluntary trade. You trade with who you want to, and you're free to trade what you want. The big advantage is it allows companies to compete. You have a lot of competition. It lowers the price of goods. It's good for the economy to have free trade. Helps your GDP. You have a lot of economic growth. People have a higher standard of living. When you're talking about trade barriers, that is something that prevents trade or blocks trade completely. Now, why, if we have free trade, and it's a good thing because it increases the standard of living and allows people to increase the GDP or countries to increase the GDP, why would we need a trade barrier? Well, you have your own domestic companies, and you want to protect those companies. Trade barriers help protect those local companies from going out of business from foreign competitors. Trade barriers protect local businesses, and as you see at the bottom, from foreign competitors. For example, if China imports items that are lower in price than our companies that make the same item, you're going to buy the Chinese items. If we put a trade barrier in place, it raises the price of the Chinese product, and it helps protect our local U.S. manufacturers. There are three types of trade barriers. There's a tariff, a quota, and an embargo. On your organizer, you need to define each. In a tariff, it's a tax on imported goods. So you're basically raising the price artificially by adding a tax or a fee. So the price goes up. So why is it used? Again, it's used to artificially raise the price of foreign goods imported into the country. It makes them more expensive, and it protects the local business people. A quota, it limits the amount of goods that are imported into a country. So what happens to the price of a product with a quota? Quotas limit the supply, but when you limit the supply, what happens to the price? It goes up. So both a quota and a tariff actually increase the price of foreign goods. So they work differently, but they have the same goal, to raise the price. And again, it helps protect the local manufacturer. An embargo, it's a complete ban on trading imports and exports between countries. So why would we use an embargo? It's the harshest of all the trade barriers. Why is it used? It's usually used for a political purpose to hurt the economy of another country and force that country to make a change. And I'll give you an example in a second. It undermines the political leaders that are in charge. It puts pressure on them to change their policy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's one of the best things to do, short of a war, to influence another country. It's usually enforced by the military. Let me give you an example. In South Africa, there was a policy that was very discriminatory against minorities. The world got together and said, South Africa, we don't like your policies. We are going to place an embargo on your country. Well, what happens is the leaders are pressured because their economy starts to go down. And when people start losing money and businesses start losing money, it forces the government to make a change. And what happened in South Africa is that policy was changed, and minorities of all ethnic groups were given equal rights and status. That's a policy where an embargo put a lot of pressure on South Africa, and it was a success and it worked. That's an example of an embargo. That ends our review of economics. I hope this was helpful.